Hello, everyone. Today we're going to talk about the third benefit of knowing the Word of God. And today it's found in Jeremiah 15:16. Jeremiah said, I found the Word and I did eat it, and it became a joy and rejoicing in my heart. And let me give you the background a little bit about Jeremiah. It was at the time when Judah was having very evil kings, and Josiah, as a small boy, was becoming the king. And so his father had locked up the temple, couldn't find the word of God anymore. They didn't even know where it was. So Jeremiah went and found the word of God, and he said, I found its words and I did eat it. He got it in his inner being, and it was a joy and rejoicing to his heart. So that is the basis of what we will talk about today. What does it really take to make our heart rejoice in humbling circumstances? Jeremiah found himself in very much humbling circumstances, but eating the word, ingesting it, was what gave his heart a joy and rejoicing. So in Hebrews 5:8, it says Jesus learned obedience by the things he suffered. So many times he had to suffer, and we will have to suffer. God uses adverse circumstances. He doesn't cause them, but he allows them to come. He uses them in order to perfect us, just like he perfected his own son through suffering. And then in Hebrews 12:10, it said, God corrects those he loves. So when God disciplines us, it's out of love, that we may be partakers of his holiness. So that is the real reason we have these things. What are we going to learn out of these adverse circumstances? We should learn to respect and to honor those in charge, no matter what they tell us. And today, George found when he was in a Bible school in Greenville that he had many humbling, humiliating, many times, circumstances. And that was part of their school. The leader of the school had been a missionary to Japan for many, many decades. His whole life was given to Japan and being a missionary there. So he knew how to deal with other people in another country, and he knew how to deal with his fellow people serving the Lord, missionaries. And so he made a school that would teach these young people how to respond correctly in humiliating circumstances so that they would have a response that they should, what Jesus would expect them to do. So he was one of those circumstances. He was in a volleyball game. Now, George is not athletic. He never did athletic things when he was a boy. He and his older brother, and there was a lot of children in his family, but those two were only a year and a half apart, and they were forever on their horse and doing stuff with their horse, and that's all they ever did. So he never knew what it was like to play sports. So here he was having to play volleyball every single day, and it was kind of a spiritual warfare place to practice his spiritual warfare tactics. And how would he respond in terrible circumstances? And he's not somebody that moves very quickly. He's got to think about it, and so he would miss his shots, and he would move slowly, and the leader of the school would say, hey, Ruthie, "Hey, Judy, why don't you help old Lynn over there? He needs some help. He's missing all of his shots." And of course, this was terribly devastating to a 35 and 36-year-old man when the other people were like 20 and whatever. And so that was very humbling. But other circumstances that he had was that they were to go out on a work detail. And the young boy was only 20 years old. George was 35 at this time. He had already been out of veterinary school for many, many years. And his partner was just below him in age. And he was a medical doctor, and he had been in practice for many years. So they were expected to do what this young boy said, who was from the city and had never put up a fence in all of his life. He even told them that. And they were to put up a pasture fence to keep cows in. And so the instructions that he gave for them, they knew that it was not going to work. So they began to say, "This will not work. This kind of fence will not stand." And he said, "This is what you will do." He said, "Now you do it now." And so they said, "Yes, sir." And they did it. And they did it with a good attitude. And the next day, the leader of the school came over and said, "Hey, boys, your fence fell down," in front of everybody, of course. And so they had to go up and do it right. But the second time, they did it the way they knew they needed to do it. And the fence did stand. And then this old lady, they were over there at her house, and she was mean, and she was angry, and she was, "You little whippersnappers, and you do this and you do that." She was going on and on and on, gave them instructions. And if they did her instructions, she would say, "I did not say that." And she would change her instructions. So it was like, how are we going to get out of this one? And she was treating them like teenagers too, like they didn't know anything. And so that was pretty humiliating to them. But they had to respond because the leader of the school would call that little old lady up and ask her, "Well, what kind of a response did they give to you?" And then he would watch their response during the volleyball games too. And he checked with that young leader about the fence also to see what kind of response that they had given them. And so our response is very important to the Lord. Not so much what is happening, but our response. So God says in whatever situation you're in, you to show respect and love and to give them a kind word. And so it says in Psalm 112, verses 1 and 2, that blessed is the man or woman who fears the Lord, who delights greatly in his commandments. His descendants will be mighty on the earth, and they'll be part of the generation of the upright. But how do we do that? Only when you ingest the word of God in your inner being. This is the way and the only way that we'll have a good response to situations that are humbling and not worthy to fuss about. And so we need to be sure we're in the Word so we'll have that good, kind, respectful response. Thank you.